This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Chinese authorities warn of signs of terrorism as violence escalates during protests in Hong Kong. South African authorities deny targeting foreigners in anti-counterfeit raids. And on International Youth Day, what are some of the challenges and opportunities for young people in Africa? Hello and a very warm welcome to Africa Live on CGTN. I'm Lindy Mtongana in Nairobi. Joining me with your business headlines is Uche Okoronkwo.
Thank you, Lindy. And here's a look at what's coming up on Africa Live Biz. G7 countries and the IMF to support China against currency manipulation claims by the US. And Africa's largest oil refinery in Nigeria to begin production at the end of 2020. All that coming up within the program. For now, it's back to Lindy.
Thanks, Uche. In our top story, Hong Kong's airport has cancelled all departing flights as thousands of protesters occupy terminal halls for a fourth day. The protests were promoted on social media and originally planned as a 3-day event, with demonstrators leaving narrow paths for travelers to pass through. But authorities are now advising all passengers to check for updates online before going to the airport. The Hong Kong and Macau Affairs Office of the State Council has strongly condemned the violent protests in Hong Kong, calling them the emerging signs of terrorism. This comes after protesters threw petrol bombs at police on Sunday, injuring one officer. Yang Guang, the State Council spokesperson, warned of emerging signs of terrorism, citing demonstrators' use of increasingly dangerous tools to attack police officers. Yang said the central government firmly supports the Hong Kong police and the courts in enforcing the law. The liaison office of the Central People's Government in Hong Kong called on its residents to also support the Hong Kong government and the police in restoring peace and order. Well, Hong Kong police say they've arrested some 150 violent protesters since Friday. They're accused of illegal assembly, attacking and obstructing the police, and possessing offensive weapons. The police have also launched a criminal investigation into a group of protesters behind organized and premeditated acts of violence over the past several weeks.
These violent demonstrators threw petrol bombs at officers and a police station. They threw the bombs at police in Tseung Sha Wan, one of which exploded in front of an officer. The flames were as high as a human's height. The photo here shows a rioter attacking a police officer in Tsim Sha Tsui with what is suspected to be a gun. The actions from these rioters are the total opposite of what they promised. We have no choice but to use force to disperse them in order to protect citizens and other police officers.
Coming to Tanzania now, the country is in mourning after a fuel tanker crashed and exploded as crowds rushed to recover leaking petrol. So far, 71 people have been confirmed dead, and President John Magufuli visited some of the 59 survivors who had been transferred to a hospital in Dar es Salaam. The deadly blast took place near the town of Morogoro. It is the latest in a series of similar disasters in Africa. CGTN's Dina Matengo has the story.
President John Magufuli has called for people to stop the dangerous practice of stealing fuel during tanker accidents. This is a common event in many poor parts of Africa. He declared a period of mourning through Monday. There are 59 patients still in hospital after the tragedy. The patients have been transferred to Dar es Salaam, where some remain in very serious condition, according to the doctors who accompanied the president. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Kassim Majaliwa announced on Sunday that a special commission would be established to investigate if any management failures had contributed to the disaster. Witnesses say the truck tipped over while trying to avoid a motorcycle. Drivers of motorcycle taxis as well as locals then flocked to the scene to collect fuel. According to the region's governor, the explosion was triggered when a man tried to retrieve the truck's battery, creating sparks that ignited the fuel. Authorities say DNA tests will be carried out on bodies that were no longer recognizable. Families can then take the remains of their loved ones and organize their own burials. Similar fuel incidences have been occurring throughout Africa. Last month, 45 people were killed and more than 100 injured in central Nigeria when a petrol tanker crashed and then exploded as people tried to take the fuel. In May, a similar incident occurred in Niger, just a short distance from the airport in the capital Niamey, leaving almost 80 people dead. Another 292 people lost their lives in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo in July 2010, and in September 2015, at least 203 people died in the South Sudan town of Maridi. Dina Matengo, CGTN.
Well, turning to International Youth Day now, Africa's economic growth forecast is fairly positive, but the youth, its most important asset, remains largely untapped. Africa has the world's largest youth population, but an alarming majority are underskilled and unemployed. This has resulted in migration and security challenges across the continent. And as the world marks International Youth Day, we take a look now at just how severe the problem has become. Here's CGTN's Robert Nagila.
Africa has the world's youngest population. Its youth population is expanding rapidly and is expected to be over 800 million by 2050. According to the African Union, there are over 420 million youth aged between 15 and 35 years. Of this number, only 1 in 6 is in wage employment. It is estimated that 90% of Africa's youth live in low to lower middle income countries. Their biggest challenge is the lack of formal jobs. The African Development Bank says between 10 to 12 million youth enter the workforce each year. However, only 3.1 million jobs are created, leaving a majority to seek work in the informal sector. This fuels migration out of Africa to Europe and contributes to conflict on the continent. In 2016, AFDB developed a strategy which aims to create 25 million jobs and reach over 50 million Africans. Titled Jobs for Youth in Africa, it expects to achieve its target by driving inclusive growth across the continent and equipping youth to realize their full economic potential. For this to happen, countries need to align their policies with African Union initiatives and tap into their youth population. Robert Nagila, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
Now, earlier we spoke to Yusuf Kalani, the former acting president of the National Youth Council of Nigeria, and he told us more about the challenges affecting the youth in Africa and the steps needed to tackle them.
We need to put in place certain, facilities that will assist the youth once they are out of school. It's one thing to go to the university to get educated. It's one thing to graduate and then meet, something that you'll be actively involved in. And that is what the government needs to do. On youth migration is quite a very painful scenario as it is. And the African government needs to do more at home. Everything is not politics. Think of the economic, benefits to your country. And we need to do that. We are blessed with a lot of vegetation and so many commercial activities that we can go in. We need to begin to think towards that so that we engage the young people. The problem is everywhere. And there are some other countries in Africa who are having crisis issues, wars and the likes and things like that. And we need to do everything possible because the outsiders will not do that for us. We have to do these things for ourselves. We have to face them and we have to plan for the youth, not just for them to go to the university and graduate, but after graduation, they need to be active. Because we do not have this now, that is the reason why we are having that influx of people moving out of the country, going into Europe and, they put their life at risk and the likes. It's quite unfortunate that in African nations, the youth are facing challenges. We all see what's happening in South Sudan, in Tunisia, even right here in my country, where the youth are totally neglected. And as young people, we are not supposed to cry for this because we have about 60 to 65 of the population. It is our right. It's what we should do. The young people are those that will contribute, that will build the nation. They have the highest population, and the workforce consists of people between age 20 and 45. And these are the productive, workforce of the nation, and they need to create their space and allow them improve in the quality of life of the country. So we just have to appeal to our politicians in Africa as it is, and we need to think and understand the fact that no great nation attained that success using external culture. You have to come in, look at what you have, look at your tradition, your norms, your values, and see how you input it into the Western civilization. So you don't allow Western civilization to overtake the general philosophy of the African continent.
Yusuf Kelani, they're reflecting on what Youth Day means for the youth of Africa. Now, in other news, the Ethiopian-Djibouti Railway has secured more than $20 million in revenue from its freight and passenger train service over the past 8 months. The 750-kilometer stretch between the two countries is the first fully electrified cross-border railway line in Africa built by China. Other projects, such as the Adama Industrial Park, located southeast of Addis, are also expected to contribute immensely to Ethiopia's economy. CGTN's Amy Mtongana has more.
The passenger train passes through 19 stations in just 15 hours. Director General Engineer Tilahan Sarkar says the first year of operation has been promising as the railway managed to operate 800 trains.
We don't have enough skill and the knowledge at the initial stage, so we are working with Chinese international railway operating companies as our management contractor. And we started operations since January 2018. The first year operation, which means 2018, is really promising. We managed to move some 800 trains, and we earned a revenue of around $35 million.
Djibouti is important to landlocked Ethiopia, which currently imports and exports nearly 90% of its goods through its port.
This railway as the economic corridor. This railway is related to your industrialization, to your urbanization, to your development. And I understand 9 industrial parks out of 15 are along this rail line. So this is not just a line, this is a corridor. And we do believe that this corridor can be, I would like to use the word, game changer for your economic development.
The railway is expected to contribute to the industrialization and diversification of the Ethiopian economy. Chinese-built Adama Industrial Park, commissioned in October last year, has also attracted international companies specialized in textile, clothing, as well as machinery production. All this is in contribution towards the country's growth and transformation plan. Amy Mtongana, CGTN.
Time for a short break. Here's a look at what's coming up next. South Africa's National Health Insurance Bill seeks to provide universal health cover. And Uganda puts measures in place to increase rice production.
Data out of the country. The country's foreign currency reserves.
With a dedicated and diverse team of anchors, CGTN now brings Africa to the palm of your hand.
I'm Perina Karibe in the heart of Nairobi, which is bustling.
From everyday heroes to the continent's most powerful figures, we bring their voices to you.
We haven't changed. And this is something most of us are very excited about.
We bring you news that's changing perspectives.
Reporting from Nairobi City Center.
News that brings Africa to the world. CGTN. See the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
South African authorities have dismissed reports that police are targeting foreign nationals following a raid that saw hundreds of immigrants arrested. Over 600 people were arrested in downtown Johannesburg when police swooped into shops to seize fake goods. Over $13 million worth of counterfeit goods were confiscated. CGTN's Yulisa Njamela has more.
It's a police raid that has everyone here in South Africa and some beyond the borders talking. According to the South African Police Service, the objective of the raids were clear: target illegal traders and confiscate any and all counterfeit goods. In fact, the police this time had received a tip-off about an illegal consignment that found its way to the Johannesburg CBD, a consignment worth over 10 million rand. When police targeted the buildings, they were attacked and chased out of the central district. Upon returning to the same buildings the following week, police got more than they bargained for.
It was even more than 10 million. Right now we're sitting with a street estimate of about 200 million, pending the confirmation by the auditors of the brand managers who will be doing counting, because they count per item. We just did an overview of what is there. So, and it was different buildings that we found counterfeit goods in, including loot that was hidden in about 46 cars in the basement parking of Lister building. All of those cars were packed to capacity, and I'm talking panel vans and mini trucks.
Over 600 people were arrested during the raids. According to Home Affairs Department, the arrestees include 10 policemen who were found to be aiding criminals. They also include almost 500 undocumented foreign nationals. Those foreign nationals appeared in court on Monday. They're now being processed for deportation. 117 of the other arrestees were released as their papers were in order. The rest still need their documents to be authenticated. The crackdown has raised concerns that it may encourage xenophobic attacks, and hence the court appearance prompted some support from fellow foreign nationals.
We've been having a lot of difficulties with law enforcement agencies, and then especially with a group of family members who are using the police and coming and terrorizing our community members, and then treating us in a bad, inhuman way.
I mean, if they targeted, criminal activity, that would have been very good. But unfortunately, for example, as we can see that a lot of people that were arrested, were people, some of them were carrying documents, and those documents were not verified, and they had to spend about 2 or 3 nights, in the cells.
Police have promptly dismissed these assertions.
That sentiment is unfortunate and it is untrue. What we target as per our mandate is crime. So if crime happens in a certain place and we find that there are people who are not legally in the country, they too will be arrested, as long as they are involved in criminal activities, which is what we found last week.
The Parliamentary Portfolio Committee on Home Affairs has also entered the fray. Committee Chairperson Bongani Bongo says migration is a reality that South Africans will have to contend with, but that it must happen within the framework of international and national laws. And that those who are here from other countries must be in possession of the relevant documents. Police are adamant that the raids will continue and they will root out any unsavory elements. Yulisa Njamela for CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
Staying in South Africa, the country's new Minister of Health recently tabled the so-called National Health Insurance Bill for consideration by Parliament. The bill hopes to provide universal health cover to the country's 58 million citizens. Angela Coppola picks up the story.
It's been estimated that universal healthcare could cost the country around $33 billion annually if one tallies up what is spent by the private and the public sectors.
We haven't got the resources to fund it. We haven't got the resources in terms of health practitioners and facilities to manage it either, because many of the state facilities are so poorly administered, have such low standards of care that they won't be allowed to participate in it. And many of the private practitioners are likely to emigrate rather than subject themselves to all the state's controls.
Only 16% of South Africans have access to private medical aid services. The remainder simply can't afford it.
Another 84% don't have that level. And I think as a South African citizen, you should have a right to quality healthcare. Now, there's a disagreement on different ways to do it, but I think conceptually this is a great idea.
The problem comes in with the implementation of it, I think. It would be good to obviously up the quality of the public healthcare services in South Africa, because as we know, it's a very bad system.
85% of the public healthcare facilities aren't up to scratch and don't comply to the minimum standards that the National Health Insurance System requires.
Again, they should really be fixing our current healthcare systems as it is. I think money should rather be involved in tightening up the systems. I mean, with the previous administration, we've seen in the higher levels, in different sectors, there's mismanagement of our SOEs. So I think they should first target our public health systems.
There's a general consensus that there should be healthcare for all 58 million people in South Africa. But who's going to pay for it? People already paying for private healthcare?
I think for the private healthcare, I think it's a bit unfair, to say the most, because yes, we can afford it, but why, because we can afford it, should we be paying more?
I think as a poor person, or someone who doesn't have that medical aid, I think you should push for NHI because it's better for you at the end of the day. You're going to get a better access to healthcare, and someone who's more wealthy, who does have their private medical insurance, obviously you're going to push back.
With the public healthcare system taking some 4% of GDP and 12% of the national budget, it's a pity that the system isn't working and people are a little anxious about having to fund it through income tax. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Let's move to the DRC now, where the spread of Ebola has caused panic in Bukavu, which stands opposite to Goma across Lake Kivu. Local government has stepped up measures to prevent the disease from entering the city, such as checking body temperatures of travelers and using disinfectant processes.
The Ebola control work in the Democratic Republic of Congo has made certain progress in the past year, but still faces grave difficulties due to local disorder. In July this year, the disease spread to Goma, with 4 people confirmed infected in the densely populated city close to the Rwandan border.
We launched an Ebola emergency response mechanism in Bukavu under the management of a coordination center. The most important thing at present is to control the flow of people. There are about 1,500 people who travel from Goma to Bukavu via Lake Kivu. We have set up checkpoints to examine the travelers upon their arrivals and check their body temperatures. If any of them is found with suspicious symptoms, we will immediately quarantine them to prevent an Ebola outbreak in Bukavu.
The government measures have not only helped with the disease prevention, but have gone a long way in also relieving people's fear.
All the people are struggling to prevent Ebola from spreading into our province. I heard that many places have launched emergency response mechanisms, so people gradually calmed down and are not as scared as before.
However, political unrest in the country and the military conflicts in some regions have affected the Ebola control efforts and triggered threats of attacks on Ebola prevention staff. Scared of the armed conflicts and the Ebola outbreak, some residents of the affected regions have fled to nearby provinces, further hampering control work.
The problem of Ebola is very complicated, as the situation of the affected area is quite complex, with fierce armed conflicts and insecurity. ADF, an armed group of Ugandan origin, has committed many atrocities in the area, especially in Beni, which makes the response mechanism hard to take effect.
Since August 1st, 2018, the disease has claimed over 1,800 lives, according to the World Health Organization, which recently declared the Ebola outbreak a public health emergency of international concern. Beryl Oro, CGTN.
Over the past few years, Uganda has been experiencing a remarkable rice boom thanks to good farming practices, premium market prices, and favorable policies that collectively have stimulated large private investment in the sector. The East African country is currently attracting attention as a potential rice basket for East Africa and contributing to greater food security in the region and a reduction on rice imports. CGTN's Daniel Arabmoy has more.
Africa consumes a total of 11.6 million tons of milled rice per year, of which 3.3 million tons are imported. According to officials, As many as 21 of the 39 rice-producing countries in Africa import between 50 and 99% of their rice requirements. Uganda is now concentrating on local farmers to boost rice production in all regions, including the planting of new variety of drought-resistant upland rice. Jimmy Lamore is a rice breeder at Uganda's National Agricultural Research Organization. He is one of the scientists who developed Uganda's new rice varieties that grow in soils with less nutrients and no fertilizer use.
We have developed varieties that are drought tolerant, and they take a shorter time. So in case rain tails very fast, you still get your crop from the field.
The focus has now shifted from increasing rice production to improving post-harvest handling, value addition and marketing.
Government is going to build more irrigation schemes, and I think that will be also positive in terms of rice production. So I think we're hopeful that in the next 2-3 years we shall be able to double our production.
According to data by the Ministry of Agriculture, Uganda exports 40,000 to 50,000 metric tons of rice to South Sudan, DR Congo, Kenya, and some Middle Eastern countries. Daniel Arab Moy, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
Let's go to Egypt now, where a number of NGOs have launched a campaign to free beaches of plastic waste. They've organized several groups to encourage children to clean up a number of beaches on the north coast of Alexandria, overlooking the Mediterranean Sea. Yasser Hakim has more.
The chosen beaches north of Alexandria are usually packed full with visitors during the summer season, and they leave behind a lot of plastic waste. A number of children have joined up to clean those beaches.
I learned how to always help the community. I learned that it's important to keep our life clean and our sea clean. And I learned that I should never throw anything on the ground again.
It's a very good idea. It's important to keep our beaches clean, and I was happy to help the children learn how to do that and create awareness of the issue.
Organizers prepared workshops for the volunteers on environmental awareness.
We were required to help organize the event and gather the children to teach them what to do. After they finish cleaning up, we gave them a small workshop on the environment and harmful effects of plastic waste. We then teach them how to recycle all they picked up from the beach to make different products out of it, such as pencil cases, and they took them with them as gifts.
The abundance of plastic waste has been a cause for concern, and the beach owners have decided to make it a plastic-free area.
There are 570,000 tons of plastic in the Mediterranean Sea, and 43% of that plastic comes from Egypt. So Egypt has a huge impact on the plastic problem in the Mediterranean Sea. That's why we're aiming to try and engage the kids in this problem and make them understand the impact they have on such a cause.
We're going to pick up everything they collected from the beaches, and then we're going to take them to factories that are certified by the Ministry of Environment for recycling. Orcas, of course, chose to donate their money through us to the kids who are in need.
The cleanup will be repeated on a regular basis in other beaches around the country to create awareness nationwide. Yes, Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
Millions of Muslims in Nigeria are celebrating Eid al-Adha, also known as the Festival of Sacrifice. CGTN's Phil Ihaza reports from the nation's capital, Abuja, on how the festival is being marked in the city.
Early morning prayers offered by Muslim worshippers in Abuja. Muslim clerics say the holy festival teaches the value of selflessness.
The same way Prophet Ibrahim made a great sacrifice and got rewarded by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we're supposed also to learn and make sacrifices and look for things that we will do to ourselves, to our communities, to our societies, to our religion, to our people, make sacrifices so that we will make people better.
One of the ways Muslim believers express this selflessness is butchering and sharing of meat with the less privileged, and spending time with loved ones.
This park at the heart of Abuja city is usually not this colorful, but every year during the Eid al-Adha, thousands of Muslims gather here to celebrate the holiday season with friends and family and enjoy the feast and pageantry.
part of the teaching at Eid al-Adha is that Muslims should live in love and harmony with non-Muslims. And for many here, this is one of 2 major Muslim holidays in a year that they look forward to.
Salah is a remarkable day to me because it's a time to share with your loved ones. You share what you have, you share with your family. It's a time to remember those who have passed away and those who are still with you. So you share the memories together.
We usually mark this kind of celebration twice a year. We go out with family, dress in our best clothes, and have fun.
I'm happy to be alive to celebrate another Salah, and I pray for more unity and peace in Nigeria.
While more fond memories are created and archived during the celebrations, the hope is that the lessons learned and kind gestures of the season can continue beyond the festive period across the country. Phil Ihaza, CGTN, Abuja.
And let's now go to Uche for your latest business news.
Thank you, Lindy. And coming up on Africa Live Biz, G7 countries and the IMF to support China against currency manipulation claims by the US. And Africa's largest oil refinery in Nigeria to begin production at the end of 2020.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Now, China is unlikely to face serious consequences from a U.S. decision to label Beijing a currency manipulator. That's given the apparent lack of G7 and IMF support for Washington's move. The head of the IMF's China department, James Daniel, has stood by the fund's assessment that the value of the yuan was in line with economic fundamentals. Former U.S. Treasury official Fred Bergstein agrees. He says that there was no chance that any G7 country would support the U.S. because there's no evidence that China was manipulating its currency. Now, in other developments, the yuan's exchange rate also was a major focus in the latest quarterly monetary policy report from China's central bank. Now, the report released Friday said that the yuan's weakening to over 7 per US dollar was triggered by market fluctuations that stemmed from trade worries. The People's Bank of China said that it will deepen the market-oriented exchange rate reforms to keep its currency flexible and stable. The reforms will include selling yuan-denominated bills in Hong Kong on a more regular basis. That's to improve the yield curve of yuan-denominated bonds in the Hong Kong market. Now, analysts say the move could also help buy back the yuan from offshore markets, thus stabilizing its exchange rate. And heading back to the continent now, Africa's largest oil refinery will not be finished until the end of 2020, and that's according to executives at Dangote. Now, this is due to problems importing steel and other equipment. Africa's most populous nation imports virtually all of its fuel due to inefficient and underutilized refineries. The state oil company, the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation, is also looking to the 650,000 barrel per day Dangote refinery, which will of course help address Nigeria's fuel problems. Now, price caps force NNPC to import nearly all its gasoline at a significant cost. Periodic fuel shortages in the country are also quite common. Despite the delays at the congested Apapa and Tin Can Island ports in Lagos, a Dangote executive says the company could start using the refinery's tank farms as a depot to warm up operations. Well, let's move on now. The Kingdom of Eswatini is looking at cutting housing, travel and entertainment allowances for its cabinet ministers as a part of attempts to revive its economy. This, of course, is according to recommendations of a royal commission, which was tasked with investigating how politicians are remunerated in the country formerly called Swaziland. Now, the report also recommends cancellations of first-class travel for ministers, only allowing Prime Minister Ambrose Mandvulo and his deputy to enjoy that luxury. Now, Eswatini Finance Minister Neil Richkenberg said in February that the kingdom was facing an unprecedented economic crisis, and it was set to continue faltering as it faces slowing rates of foreign investment and a fast-growing wage bill. Now, keeping China's crops safe from pests is quite tedious work, yet thanks to some major technological advancements in the country, it is getting easier and more efficient. A group of scientists in southern China are behind the efforts to deploy more drones for this important task. Here's CGTN's reporter Gay Yunfei with the story.
China's pest control is a costly business. In 2016, over 1.8 million tons of pesticides were consumed across the country, accounting for 1/3 of the world's total amount. But since then, China's pesticide use has declined. One reason? Drones.
Using drones to spray pesticides is 30 times more efficient than doing it the traditional way, and we have also found that it cuts pesticide usage by a quarter. For each drone to carry out its task, it takes only 2 liters of water per acre in China, but with human spraying, it takes 60 liters of water.
37-year-old Wang Juan is a postdoctoral fellow at South China Agricultural University. She and her team have been studying precision agriculture aviation pesticide spraying technology since 2014.
Our goal is to achieve precise spraying. First, we use spectral cameras installed on the drones to scan farmland and generate prescription pictures that can show different levels of insect damage to the farmland. Then the drone can control the number of pesticides sprayed on the crops according to those damage levels.
To achieve their goal, a huge amount of detailed work needs to be carried out. Wang and the students have to fly all over the country to carry out experiments on different crops and collect the raw data piece by piece.
Aviation spraying is a very mature concept in the US, but it's still a new thing in China. So the industry here doesn't have an option standard. What's more complicated is that the standard for each crop in each stage of growth is different. So we're now trying to establish a standard model for China's drone spraying.
And China's world-leading drone industry is also expanding its arena to the farmlands. DJI, the world's largest drone maker, says they have sold more than 10,000 agricultural drones in the past 3 years. And the company keeps adding more cutting-edge technologies to pesticide spraying.
With digital beamforming technology, it can realize 3D point cloud imaging, which can effectively identify complex farmland scenes and achieve autonomous obstacle flight. The radar supports terrain slope and mountain slope detection, and the drone can fly in a simulated manner.
With an all-weather data imaging radar that can monitor farmland environment, it can spray pesticide over a 100,000 square meters area in 1 hour, a 67% increase over its drone predecessors. Behind all of these innovations is the dedication of hundreds of engineers. Li Xingnong, an engineer from DJI, is one of them.
I spent 6 months traveling across China to collect data of different crops. It's hard, but you're participating in a great cause of modernizing and reforming the traditional agriculture production mode. It makes me proud.
By 2018, there were over 30,000 agricultural drones in China, a nearly 4-fold increase from a year earlier. This rampant growth is also boosting the wild imagination within China's smart agriculture industry. Ge Yunfei, CGTN, from Hainan and Guangdong provinces.
Well, let's turn our attention now to the world of virtual reality. Maureen Fan, who runs an Emmy Award-winning animation studio in San Francisco, she's at the forefront of creating virtual reality films. Well, CGTN's Connie Lee sat down with a lady who has fought to make her childhood dreams come true. Take a look.
Something is out there, and if this fire doesn't scare it off, things could get really ugly.
What's out here is a created world, experienced through your senses.
otherwise known as virtual reality, or VR. And creating this VR world is the reality of Maureen Fan, CEO and co-founder of Baobab Studios.
The mission is to inspire the world to dream by bringing out your sense of wonder. And we do that by introducing you to characters that you can fall in love with, taking you to worlds you could have never imagined, and making you matter.
Making you, or me, matter by making us the main character of their interactive films.
When I watch animation or play an animated game, I'm brought back to that 5-year-old sense of self where I thought anything was possible. And I've always loved animation since I was young, and I wanted to be an animator all my life. Wow. But my parents, being immigrant to Asian, said that I'd be poor and destitute if I followed my crazy dreams in Hollywood. So I actually took the more practical path when I graduated and went to eBay and was a UI designer.
But on nights and weekends, she was taking animation classes, which eventually led her to Baobab.
It's been a long path to it, but I'm really happy that I'm doing what it is that I always wanted to do.
And she's extra happy these days with the studio's win this year of 4 Emmys for the short film Crow, the Legend.
It was really important for this particular piece that Native Americans in Philanthropy was our advisor, because it's one of the first ever indigenous worldview animations out there.
But beyond creating award-winning pieces, Fan is actively using her role to bring more diversity into the media industry through her work with Gold House.
Our mission is to shine a light on Asian Americans, because we know that there's people who want to consume content created from different perspectives. It's been very clear throughout my entire career that I have a unique perspective, being Asian American and also being female, in very male-dominated industries. I realized that being a woman and being Asian American gave me strength, because I was different and that I could see things that other people couldn't necessarily see.
And her motivation for all that she does goes back to bringing out that dreamer inside every person.
I really believe that people in general can do much more than they think that they can. And maybe it's just my childhood growing up of feeling like I can't do art, but I can. And if they would just realize that, they would go for their dream.
Connie Lee, CGTN, San Francisco.
Well, that's all for now in Africa Live Biz, but coming up later on Global Business Africa, Zimbabwe has obtained 3 separate loans of just over $108 million for power generation projects and its broadband expansion. We'll be looking at the details of those loans. All that coming up at the top of the hour. For now, back to you.
Thanks, Uche. Well, let's take a short break, but here's what's still ahead on Africa Live. Coming up, we see how a hero dad in Kenya is transforming the lives of children living with disabilities.
Join us in Global Business and see Africa through our eyes. The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Qanater, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival, and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back. We start here in Kenya now, where there are more than 6 million people living with disabilities. Most have limited opportunities for accessing education, but one man, a father of a disabled child, is fighting to change this. Stanley offers free daily transport to physically impaired children in his community to help them get to school. CGTN's Goma has more.
Stanley Mutanya is keen to see these children board his vehicle. This would not have been possible had the children opted for public transport, as they do not have the reasonable accommodations that children with special needs require. And this is what motivates Stanley to drive these children to school at no cost for close to 2 years now.
I stopped working as a driver when my child fell ill. Soon after starting taking her to school, I realized there were more parents who needed to take their children to school but lacked transport. I have around 33 children whom I take to school.
Schools for children with special needs are also limited and located far away from most communities where they are needed most.
The center was established in 2007 in order to support children with special needs, majority of them coming from Kibera slum. We started with about 6 children. Currently we have about 71 children at the center. We support them through appropriate intervention measure, which include the therapy service. We have basic learning skills. We have empowerment program and advocacy.
The Mary Rice Center is just one of the few institutions offering education to this special group. The Kenyan government is keen to expand inclusive education in schools across the country.
What we have done is to try and, as much as possible, to make sure that most of them access education in an equal measure or even better measure. Another measure that we had actually put in place is to make sure that there is adaptable exam. Somebody with disability may have lost their hand, so their handwriting are bigger and they are slower in writing. So we give them enough time and we give them enough space to be able to answer questions, not like any other normal student.
But not every child is privileged. There are other obstacles that hinder them from obtaining any formal education.
In fact, the problem we have in Kenya, first and foremost, is cultural beliefs. And I have told you, a child with disability, first of all, you start by blaming parents, that there is something they did wrong, that is why they have given birth, and that's why they are referred as a curse, literally. So they are hidden. And when you are hidden, meaning you will not be seen in public. Schools are public. So education-wise, you will not be taken to school so that people don't know that this family is a caste family.
So far, progress has been made in removing discriminatory barriers and changing attitudes in the environment. But thousands of disabled children cannot access education. For this group, though, they are certain that Stanley will continue to pick them up and drive them to school. Chamgono, CGTN.
Coming up in your sports news. The Kenya Football Federation and coach Sebastian Min mutually agree to terminate his contract.
Africa, where champions are made, records are broken, legends are born. We're there for every goal, for every knockout, for every step of the way. Match Point, only on CGTN.
Africa Live.